Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest Critical Conversation event. My name is Hayaatun Sillem, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Royal Academy of Engineering and the Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering Foundation. And it's my very great pleasure to be hosting another of these online fireside chats that we run to explore topical issues that are important for engineering and important for society. Our overarching goal at the Royal Academy of Engineering is to harness the power of engineering to build a sustainable society and an inclusive economy that works for everyone. And we use these critical conversations to look at some of the engineering challenges and opportunities that are going to be crucial to addressing this goal. Back in March 2023, the government published its UK Science and Technology Framework, which set out the 5 technologies that, in the words of the framework, are most critical to the UK: quantum, semiconductors, engineering biology, artificial intelligence, and telecommunications. And through this mini-series of critical conversations, we're exploring each of these technologies in turn. For each event, I'm joined by an array of brilliant experts to help us to understand what these technologies are, why they matter, and what we need to do to capture the benefits and manage the risks. Our first event exploring quantum took place at the end of July. We then explored semiconductors earlier this month. And if you missed those, you can still catch up via the link in the chat. But today, we're going to be focusing on engineering biology. Simply put, engineering biology is the application of rigorous engineering principles to the design and development of biological systems and parts, such as cells or proteins. It has the potential to contribute to a wide range of sectors and applications, from medicine to agriculture, chemicals, materials, water, energy, environmental protection, the list goes on. And to help us learn more about this fascinating topic, I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Alicia El-Haj, Academy Fellow and Interdisciplinary Professor of Cell Engineering at the Healthcare Technologies Institute and Director of the Institute of Translational Medicine at the University of Birmingham. Henrik Hagemann, a member of the Academy's Enterprise Hub and the CEO and co-founder of Pure Affinity. And Professor Guy-Bart, Professor of Biosystems Engineering and Control and Royal Academy of Engineering Chair in Emerging Technology at Imperial College London. Thank you so much all for joining us. I'll get back to you in just a second. But let's start with a very brief introduction to the technology. The discovery of the structure of DNA in 1953 heralded a revolution in molecular biology. Fast forward to the present day, and we're now able to sequence, in other words, to read, and to synthesize, in other words, to write, genetic material such as DNA relatively rapidly and accurately, and even quite cheaply, allowing us to instruct cells to function and behave according to human design. And over the past couple of decades, we've seen this extraordinary convergence of engineering, biosciences, physical sciences, computing, data science, to create this new discipline, which draws on those rigorous engineering principles of design, including that classic iterative design, build, test, learn cycle, principles of modularity, characterization, standardization, allows us to apply those to biological processes, including DNA manipulation. And this is what we call engineering biology. For the avoidance of doubt, I should say synthetic biology is sometimes also used interchangeably, but engineering biology is becoming more common now. And of course, as the CEO of the Royal Academy of Engineering, that is something that we support. So I'm going to turn to you first, Guy, and ask, what else do our audience need to understand about engineering biology and its potential applications, so that we all go into this discussion with that core baseline of understanding?
Thank you, Hayaatun. Yeah, I mean, as you have clearly outlined, I mean, we are at a very exciting time in human history. We have the possibility to cheaply and readily, quickly read, write, and edit DNA, the code of life. The code that basically allows us to be us, allows every cell from every living organism on Earth to exist, live, thrive, evolve, grow. Now, there is some very interesting aspect in this, because it means that if we harness the code of life, we can engineer biological systems to make them do new things, to help us produce new materials, to help us produce new chemicals, drugs, medicine, to help grow vegetables more sustainably, develop plants that are resistant to swings in climate. So the number of applications is quite broad and vast. And if we think about the whole process from a technological standpoint, and this is not a quote that is mine, but this is a quote that I think reflects very well how to think about engineering biology. Biology is the most advanced technology on Earth. We just need to learn to harness it for not only human benefit, but for the planet global benefits.
So thank you so much. That really frames how powerful and how broad engineering biology is. Let's drill down a bit further into what area you each work on, because I know you're all come at this from different perspectives. So Alicia, can I ask you to first of all explain which aspect of engineering biology you work on and why we should care about this? Why does this matter?
So my area is in healthcare. My specific focus is in healthcare, and the concept that we can engineer cells, which we can use as therapies or for treatments such as artificial blood, various therapies of those sorts. And of course, why it's important is that basically what we're aiming for are diseases which really don't have any other solution. So there is no drug which is going to cure these various illnesses. So using cell-based approaches gives us a whole new remit in terms of how we can treat and help patients with their diseases. So I think the area that my main focus is on is really looking at the engineering aspects of engineering biology, how that we kind of break down the complexity, how we take elements and actually use these to make something that's a therapy. And that's also looking at how we can scale up the processes, what the technologies, the infrastructures we need to actually make them realistically products for the future. So that's the main focus of my research.
Fantastic. And I'm now going to ask Henrik to share a little bit about what you work on and again, why it matters, especially to the public. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hayaatun. So I work in the environmental side. It used to be really quite niche, and I took part in a very large synthetic biology competition called iGEM. So iGEM is this wonderful grassroots initiative where you let undergraduate students or postgraduate students run wild with new research. And we developed a wild idea at the time of engineering cells. So like Guy-Bart explained, we reprogram cells to make a new material. In our case, we wanted to use that material for water treatment. So it's an environmental application, but you could engineer it for lots of applications. We took a wild organism that we found in kombucha tea. So it was quite a difficult organism to engineer. It wasn't a model organism, which is maybe something else we'll talk about. At the time, it was wild to even sort of try this, but it came out with a somewhat good result. We presented this at the competition. We didn't win. We just got a second prize, which we were like okay with. We were happy enough, and we actually ended up founding a company based on that first technological approach. Where we are now is we use materials to make targeted treatment. So why should we care about targeted water treatment? One, it affects our health. So for many of these chemicals that are synthetic, so human-made, they don't have a natural material to capture them. So you might want to explore a wider chemical design space, which is something engineering biology allows, these design, build, test, learn processes. Two, it impacts our water and the environment. So the natural environment around us, it actually is a huge asset, and a lot of things rely on it. Just like the bees sort of showed, if we don't have bees and we don't get pollination, a lot of things grind to a halt, including agri-tech. And then the third reason, which is more topical, is lawsuits. So large companies for these forever chemicals, they just got sued $140 billion for only this group of chemicals. They settled it at $10 billion. And so these are large chunks of money that are moving around. So there are more new drivers, which weren't there 5, 6, 8 years ago. It's a hard journey, I would say. So we could use, in our case, engineering biology for discovery of new small peptides that can sit on the surface. That's a search aspect. This engineered living material we started out with, I'll come on to it, but it's very hard to scale up, and we can talk about some of the challenges there. So we've had to compromise in the approach and still try and stick with that market need. And maybe that's something I'll go into a little bit as well. I'm a bioengineer by training, so I trained under the masters of people like Guy-Bart Stan at Imperial way back.
Thank you, Henrik. And it's pretty amazing that all that came out of a student competition. Guy, we'd love to also hear about your research, and again, why does it matter? Why should we care about it?
Sure. So I come from a background in applied mathematics, and originally I wasn't trained as an experimental synthetic biologist. So my field of expertise, at least originally, is in complex systems, and in particular analysis, optimization, and control of complex nonlinear dynamical systems. And so I took this expertise in synthetic biology to try to achieve what we have been doing in the physical world, which is essentially developing methods and technologies that make the systems we build more robust and achieving higher performance. And this is how the technologies of today, like our computers or handheld computers, if we can call them like that, are achieving this type of performance. The consumer market accepts technologies when they are reliable. Now, when we engineer biology, the picture is starkly different. Biology is a different substrate. So it's difficult to engineer. It requires a lot of experimental work. But on top of it, one of the key characteristics that distinguish a biological system from physical system is that physical systems don't really evolve, at least on the time scales of use. They deteriorate, some components deteriorate, and performance might degrade. But when we are looking at bacteria that basically grow and divide on the scale of 20 minutes, creating 2 daughter cells, and doing so go through a process of mutation and evolutionary selection. This means that we are dealing with evolving systems, and the core concepts of design, build, test, learn that we cherish in engineering need to be adapted for this type of design and this type of evolving system. Now, that's the power of biology. This is one of the key aspects that this technology is exploiting to create systems that have immense adaptability and complexity in the face of adverse condition, in the face of uncertainties, in the face of perturbations. But what if we can control it? What if we can put in place systematic approaches to design not the perfect system from the start, but a system that will, as generations of cells go through it, converge towards the desired solution, a solution that does what you want and does it reliably with high robustness. So this is the kind of thing that I'm looking at, both from a mathematical or computational viewpoint and an experimental viewpoint.
Brilliant. Well, I think between you exemplify one of the features of engineering biology, which is it's right. Inherently multidisciplinary, and it has this incredible breadth to it. So let's take that as a backdrop. We might talk a bit more about specific areas of research and innovation in a minute. I also want to mention to our audience that we will absolutely be trying to get through any audience questions that you share with us. So please do pop them onto the page through which you're viewing. There should be comment boxes below the window where you're viewing this event. And if you pop your question in there, we'll try to get through as many as possible during the course of the event. But I want to just sort of step back a bit and look at the slightly more strategic picture for a few minutes. And engineering biology has actually been identified for quite a while as a priority from a government perspective. So back in, I think it was 2013, it was chosen as one of the government's 8 great technologies. For some people, that will mean something, for others, maybe not. And of course, it's now identified by the current government as one of 5 critical technologies for the UK. And following on from this, the government has said that it wants to establish a strategic approach to engineering biology and its applications across the economy, in the government's words, to maximise opportunities and mitigate the risks. And there's a consultation open right now seeking evidence into the strengths, weaknesses and opportunities for the UK's engineering biology ecosystem. The deadline is Friday, so if you haven't shared your views and you've still got some and you would like to do so, then you've got a couple of days to get in. And the strategic approach to technologies is very much part of this notion of a strategic advantage through science and technology agenda. What do I mean by that? I mean harnessing science and technology purposefully, intentionally, in order to achieve defined outcomes for security, prosperity, resilience, international influence, and of course, people in the environment. And in the context of the UK, the ultimate aim is, of course, to confer comparative advantage for the UK. So, Guy, I'd like to start by asking you, what would you like to see in the engineering biology strategy or approach that the UK government is currently developing? What's really important to see in there?
There are many. This is a multifaceted question, but I think one key aspect that I feel is really important is to embrace engineering in biology. I come from a school of thought where I look at biology or biological systems as a different substrate, but there is nothing magical about it. It's like mechanical, chemical, electrical engineering. It's something where if we put our minds to it, we should be able to open the book of life, read its content, I'm talking about DNA, understand the functions that it has, and start to think from an engineering point of view, from a problem-solving point of view, how we can take a system view of biology that allows us to solve our biggest challenges. And for that, we need to work at the crossroads of disciplines, genetics, molecular biology, computational approaches, AI, machine learning, and so on and so forth, and put our efforts together to try to really crack this problem. What is the code of life? Can we go beyond it? Can we surpass billions of years of evolution and create solutions that work for all of us sustainably? And that requires the government to commit to such an approach and to cherish the requirements for multidisciplinarity. I mean, I'm fortunate to be coming from to have been accepted in this community as an applied mathematician. My previous life was about writing proofs and theorems, and to be able to then cross over to something that is basically experimental synthetic biology or experimental engineering biology. But it requires so many skills and multidisciplinary approaches. This is a complex problem that needs to be solved collectively.
Okay, thank you, Guy. I'm going to ask Henrik next, then I'll come to Alicia. Henrik, you've just raised nearly $14 million in your Series A. So first of all, congratulations, that's awesome. As a scaling company with big ambitions, what is it you need from the government in this engineering biology strategy that someone is going to be busy drafting in the coming months?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it came up just last week when I was talking to one of our American partners at this London-based financing firm, a VC. And so what comes up again and again is how can we build the automotive equivalent industry for the engineering biology sector? So it's really taking a systems approach to the end-to-end bits, all the suppliers, all the components, all the talent, all this expertise. How can we build it into the UK? I think that's relevant at an early stage where you have biofoundries. You're starting to develop those really well. There's one at Sinby City or in the north and the west, Bristol. But what happens at the later stages? We have CPI somewhat, we have some infrastructure, but it's very fragmented. And who sits and convenes all of this together? Can we have sort of bodies that are more focused towards the scaling part of the journey? And that means reactors, that means infrastructure, that means being able to ship logistically large volumes of reagents around, whether you're making products or whether you're making targeted therapeutics or whether you're making something else. We have cell and gene therapy, which is an exciting new area. There's a lot of opportunity to build infrastructure for those plays and to capture a big part of this new market. For us, we need talent. We have capital, as you said. Yes, we're grateful to have gotten this injection of capital, but now it's about being able to spend it. And we see the US investing very largely in the value chain. They're thinking strategically, how can they go after this with the Infrastructure Reduction Act being a part of it? But that's just one component. So can we take a more systems joined up approach? I think there's been there was the 8 great technologies, and then it kind of fell off a cliff a little bit. And then we try again, and it's like, okay, let's pull it together and try and build infrastructure. That would be valuable. And then learning from each other. So how do we make sure there are peer groups of scaling companies or growth stage companies or academics coming together and thinking of, we have this analytical kit. Let's say we have the Royce Institute, amazing infrastructure. How many scaling engineering biology companies know about that? And how can we bring them together to actually tap into each other's resource? Because they're trying, but it feels a bit fragmented still.
Thank you very much, Henrik. And I'm going to move to Alicia. So you've heard what Guy and Henrik have said, the call for a systems approach, thinking about the underpinning infrastructure. You're in a different sort of application area when it comes to engineering biology. What's the view from your vantage point? What do you want to see in an engineering biology strategy for the UK? And where do you see as the real opportunities for the UK to achieve strategic advantage?
So I think, I think the points that have been raised are really well made. So I won't necessarily reiterate them. I think that there has been initiatives being brought forward, and I think basically Henrik mentioned the foundries, and there are various.
Alicia, do you want to just explain what foundries are? Because I think there'll be some people watching who won't necessarily have heard that term.
Well, it's essentially trying to balance between kind of blue skies, more basic research, and the translational machineries that we need. So the foundries are more based at the kind of innovation and research elements in terms of it, but they're still trying to bring groups together to try and speed the process up, to work in teams in that regard. So these are initiatives that basically come from government funding, and essentially universities will all collaborate and come together to gain this funding. So an example on the translational area where I work in are the hubs for gene therapy, the infrastructure supports that the MRC has recently initiated, which again are collaborative groups. There's about 3 or 4 of them that are coming together to create the infrastructure, to bring the scaling aspects, the engineers, the various different groups together to try and bring this forward. I think it's interesting, though, that it's still perceived as being fragmented. And I think that's because it's early days, and I think these groups have to start working together and actually start to iterate what they're doing and make it more known. What concerns me a little bit is that, of course, we have very short-term funding in the UK. So sometimes these grants will only be for 3 or 4 years. So they can get up and running, the community can learn about them, but then the funding dries up and the idea is that they need to be sustainable. And I think one of the real challenges is how to create infrastructure that's supported through the long discovery process of something like engineering biology. These kind of disruptive technologies have quite a long development time, and it's not necessarily aligned with the very rapid kind of pharmaceutical development time, although that's long in terms of clinical, but in terms of the initial phases, they can be much shorter. So I think this kind of long-term support is something that we need to think about and understand how the strategic developments are going to occur in that space. I would also say, last thing, just to bring on the multidisciplinary, we need to build a multidisciplinary community of young scientists. That's one of the things I always go on about, and stop labeling ourselves. If you noticed, I didn't label myself as anything at the beginning of this, and I think we need to stop labeling ourselves as things. We are multidisciplinary scientists now who can speak across the span from engineering to biology to maths and understand that. And I think people can do that, and we need to build that community much more widely.
Brilliant, Alicia. Well, I think you've given me the hook to ask one of the audience questions that's come through, and that's, given the multidisciplinary nature of engineering biology, what are the fundamental engineering knowledge and skills that we need to be developing in our current and future engineering graduates to build the skills base for this technology, or this set of technologies? I think I'll offer you that one to you, Guy, to start us, and then others, please do jump in if you'd like to.
Sure. Well, I'm a bit biased. I will give you the perspective from my background. I think there is a very exciting emerging field, which is called biocontrol, which is basically trying all the way from a theoretical perspective to computational analysis down to experimental testing, and then cycling back into the theory, to place the foundations for the theory that would underpin the design and the analysis of biological systems with all their quirkiness and their special features. I talked about evolution, but also, fundamental questions like life is sustained by homeostatic processes, and disruption of homeostasis in cells leads to disease or leads to problems in gene expression regulation.
Guy, can I just interrupt? So homeostasis, we mean keeping that constant environment in the cell or in the body?
Not only the environment, keeping let's say the gene expression context or certain biochemical processes constant in the face of perturbations, change in temperature, change in growth environment conditions. And this homeostasis, which is foundational to life, exists because there are gene regulatory networks that operate in a particular way. And so one of the key questions is, how do you build new ones around expression of genes of interest? If you want to produce, for example, a particular molecule, it might be interesting to produce it at a constant rate, irrespective of fluctuations in the big bioreactor in which the cells are growing. Can you do that? Mm-hmm. And that's just one example. Homeostasis, you can have, for example, sentinel cells that would live in your gut, monitor the presence of chemicals or nutrients, and then automatically decide on what to produce at what moment, where, so that you are immune to a certain disease, or you produce the medicine locally when and where wanted, or you basically produce the nutrients that you don't have because you have a genetic deficiency. You can't. There are diseases like this, like the ability to digest certain foods is not present in some humans or in some animals. And you could have a prosthetic gene circuit in engineered bacteria that take care of it for you, and that would require this kind of constant expression levels of something in the face of perturbation and uncertainty. And the list goes on and on and on. So this would be something very interesting. The other point that I will make very briefly is, I think that we are at a critical time of convergence of emerging technologies. The big one that everyone is talking about, because we are exposed to it almost every day, is basically AI and capability. We have heard about LLMs, large language models, and what they can do. Well, LLMs work on basically human text, essentially, and other things like generating images, generating videos, generating all sorts of things that human can understand. Now, imagine that the language of life, DNA, the 4 letters, A, C, T, and G, is basically another alphabet. So you can see that there are parallels to be made, and that we could use technologies that have allowed us to write human understandable text in a way that they pass the Turing test quite clearly. Could we do this to write DNA, to write the code of life in a way that is useful to us.
So I think you're raising some tantalizing possibilities, Guy, but I just want to spend a little bit longer on the skills question. So I'm going to come to you in a minute, Henrik, but first of all, just Alicia, what's your take on how do we train people for this inherently multidisciplinary activity? What are those core components that everyone who's in training to be an engineering biologist needs to acquire during the course of their studies?
I think it's an interesting question because it depends from which side you're looking at it. I'm an interdisciplinary chair at Birmingham, so I span between the medical school and chemical engineering, actually. And there are interesting aspects of engineering biology that actually come from the chemical engineering backgrounds. How do we give these students the skills? Well, I think a lot of them come in and they've dropped biology very early in their education. They don't do biology A level, and they find it quite off-putting, actually, the complexity of biology, and also the lack of consistency, the fact there's a lot of redundancy in biological systems. It's not standardized. And I think this means that it becomes almost in the too difficult pile. So I think building awareness of biology in engineering courses back into the system is really quite important, and using engineering biology as a vehicle to do that, where they can see it as something that they can apply the core skills they're learning as engineers into tackling the questions in engineering biology. So that would be my one suggestion.
Well, brilliantly, Guy advocated for more engineering principles and you've advocated for more understanding of the biological domain. So Henrik, where do you stand on this? And actually, I would also be interested in your broader reflections on your challenges around hiring talent, because I know this is something you're very passionate about. And what does it feel like to be at the sharp end trying to build the workforce for an engineering biology powered company?
Yeah, so I'll tap into Alicia's point first, which is really, I sit quite close to that student journey. I'm not that distant from it. And I remember coming into it, having not done biology at my A levels, thinking, wow, there's a lot of, well, why would I need to do it? I'm going to do engineering, chemistry, maths, physics. That's the hardcore one. So why do we have a perception that those are more hardcore, or that there's more memorization in biology? I mean, it's also down to how it's taught, but if we can start priming people differently early on, that could be something. The other one was sort of, I have a bias for action. So I think back to my undergraduate days, and I got the chance to do a hands-on project, synthetic biology, cloning a thermophile from a volcano to make it make new biofuels. And that's another application. Didn't work well enough, but the idea was there, and it gave me enough appetite to work with a geneticist and a sort of scientist, and then me and others as engineers to want to do iGEM, which is this international genetically engineered machine competition. I think we can get people involved with engineering biology early on through societies, through summer stints, they're called Europes, or through competitions. Like, it's almost like a hackathon. We're not hacking biology to kill people. We're trying to make it do something great or something funky. Like, people would make colorful plants and try and see if it could scale up. I think the point around challenges for hiring really comes down to that funnel question. So a lot of people, I remember some of the professors would be like, oh, a lot of students, they just go off to management consulting or go into this kind of financial world because the skills you learn are useful enough that you can go into those avenues. I think we need to provide examples early on that you can do meaningful work that also has a career progression. It's not just ending up you being a postdoc, turning the wheels between lots of moving parts forever and ever and ever, because that can feel really challenging if you're doing 20, 40 years of it. So giving examples of where it can work. We're trying to hire within the UK. So maybe some of the challenges come from different things. Like, it could be bringing in talent from the EU where it's less difficult. well, it's more difficult than it used to be. There may maybe more strings attached. The partners might not be able to come in, even if you can sponsor a visa. So you have a bit more hesitancy. The other part is you have competing spaces. So how can we get people like Guy-Bart stand out and saying, hey, engineering biology is the key application for AI? And this whole buzzword that's going on, like, it does lend itself to what's happening here. I think we need to get a little bit more, get better at getting that message out there, so that it doesn't just fall by the wayside when these big waves of interest of buzz, like the current AI wave, hit us.
Brilliant. Well, I think there's definitely something there about experiencing it for yourself. Almost there's a confidence gap if you're coming from one domain into the other. So those multidisciplinary opportunities to kind of almost play in this space can be very, very powerful. But I'm getting a bit behind. There's so many audience questions coming in. I've got to stop talking, and I've got to make sure we cover some of these. So Samuel Armistead, who's at the University of Colorado, is asking a question that kind of builds on what we've been discussing. So Sam's saying, as a multidisciplinary scientist attempting to integrate engineering biology with a built environment, I see a particular challenge associated with bioengineering and standardization in both the long timeframes involved and potential heterogeneity. Does anyone have any experience of challenges in this area? I suspect he's also looking for solutions, not just challenges. But I mean, Guy, maybe start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, standardization is essential, right? We would like to master it, but what that means is that we need to understand how to characterize biological components, parts, genetic elements, or cells. And one of the reasons why it's complicated is because, especially in biological system context, plays a massive role. So when you characterize something in different contexts, you get different results. I mean, I will give a very, very simple example. If we take a unit of length, like the meter, right? I mean, somewhere in Paris, there is, a meter as a measurement unit, which is the gold standard. It's a piece of metal. But if you were to measure it at 120 degrees versus 80 degrees versus 40 degrees, it's not 1 meter anymore. It changes. Now, cells and their genetic makeup and components can be, there is an analogy with that. I mean, depending on what they grow on, what kind of environment they're in, the temperature, this all affects basically the characterization and the standardization. So context is key, and we need to accumulate just the bare minimum information that is useful for characterization and standardization and exploit it. And that is not necessarily trivial to do, but if we were able to do that, then we would have a better roadmap, a better plan for building biological systems according to specs.
Okay, thanks, Guy. I'm going to keep going with the audience questions so we can get through as many as possible. But if anyone's got anything to add, then please feel free to tag it on to your answer to the next question, which is from Helen Newells. And that's, are there multiple technologies in engineering biology that are fighting for supremacy? Or is there basically one key technology that's going to be scaled and exploited? I wonder if you're all going to agree on this. Alicia, I'm going to start with you.
Gosh, that's quite a question. I don't think there is one technology. I think it's, we're very much in the era of multiple technologies working together, team science. And I think it's partly the nature of the breadth of application. There are so many different applications that we're spanning across in engineering biology that I think looking at one particular approach would not be the case at all. So I guess the simple answer is no. No, it isn't.
Thank you.
And someone might want to contribute and disagree with me, though.
Yes, anyone want to offer up a holy grail technology? Guy, Henrik? Go on.
I
Henrik.
agree. I agree. I think it would be foolish to try to pick one. I think the wealth and actually the win situation is convergence of several technologies And it comes back a little bit to the point that Henrik and I made at some point earlier on. I mean, we need a system view on these things. You can't. You really need to have the whole development process in view when you are trying to tackle a challenge like this.
Great, Guy. And Henrik, you're nodding away. Anything you want to add?
I'm happy with it. I was just going to say, we see lots of waves. So there is the RNA attention around the vaccine. So there is CRISPR, which came up earlier than that. They are still buzzing away. They are still useful. And so it's a question of what can it be used for? And you can probably use it better if you converge different branches within engineering biology. So agree in this one. I try and be contrarian, but not on this one. Just agreed.
We'll find a different topic for you to disagree on. I want to turn to a really important topic that's been raised by Linda Bedenik from the UK Bioindustry Association, and that's how do we go about public and political understanding and acceptance of engineering biology processes and products. And Alicia, I'd like to ask you for your perspectives on this really key question around public engagement, public dialogue, political awareness. What's your perspective on where we are today? There's definitely been a significant amount of effort put into this. Do you think we're in a good place? What more do we need to be doing?
I think we still have a lot to do, actually. I think public perception, I think people are not really clear on what engineering biology is. But I think if we look at other disciplines that have come in with these kind of new ideas, one of the things that's really helped them is having exemplars, having what we call early wins, things like the sort of things that Henrik is doing, where he's now got a company that's going to take this forward. And people can start to understand, I think, much better from the kind of being exposed to the many things that can come out from these different research programs. So I think it will improve, but I think it's extremely important that people still keep that dialogue going, because I think certainly in the clinical area and healthcare, people can sometimes be quite concerned about how safe these different approaches are. The thought of having artificial blood cells being put in your body, it's, you need to build confidence in people that this is something that they really want and will help them. And public awareness is really critical to that. So we do spend a lot of time in that, and also bringing patients into our development process. This is a really important area that's growing, where we're trying to bring our end users into our research activities and get them to understand why we're doing it, what we're doing it, input, even at the very early stages of our research programs. And I really actually believe that it's an incredibly important aspect of our new approaches that we're doing that we should carry on.
Brilliant. So no room for complacency, but we see the value in these participatory approaches. Henrik, you're trying to make this a reality. What are you experiencing, and where do you think we need to put more effort into the public engagement and political awareness building?
I think we see some early sectors where there's more understanding, and that's definitely holding the field back. So for us, we're looking at the water space and adoption of a genetically modified material. Even if it was just in the, not a living cell in the final product, there's a huge barrier. There's certifications or standards you need to fulfill and very long cycles. That's why we had to twist and sort of move into a workable approach, which is this peptide mimic, which covers the surface. And it really inhibits innovation, and that could benefit the end user. I wholly agree on the informed design side, bring in the end user, but also bring in other stakeholders. Like we talk about responsible research and innovation, which is really this principle of embedding the unexpected consequences of this technology early on and trying to build guardrails around it. I think we can do that better if we have standardization, characterization, but also modular parts. So we can actually combine those. That will help to build more public awareness. I saw this wonderful piece a few years back from a CEO of a iGEM spin-out called Dingo Bioworks saying, I run a GM company. It was like an editorial. So do we need more people going out and saying, hey, your vaccines were made by companies that develop engineering biology tools, and they kind of were helpful? Oh, okay, that's contagious. Let's talk about another application like healthcare, where generally people are happy with cell and gene therapy. Boom, you've cured cancer for a patient. It's incredible, and people tend to adopt it. Maybe that's adoption because there is the FDA in place, and they feel like, oh, it's been de-risked, it's been made safe. So can we do something like de-risking these other applications to improve public awareness, as well as embedding them in the development process?
It's quite complex, isn't it? The different reactions that people have to different types of technology, different types of application of those technologies. And so, yeah, I think this is definitely a space that we could spend long on, but I want to make sure that I also give you the opportunity, Henrik, to talk about another important societal interface, which is around sustainability. And so I'd love to hear you talk a bit more about what's the potential offered by engineering biology for us to improve environmental sustainability. And I guess we should look at it both from the point of view of what the footprint is of the technologies themselves, as well as the opportunity to advance progress towards net zero or sustainable development goals, or whatever your preferred framework is.
That's a great question. And I'm sure the others can also fill in. So for me, we get pigeonholed with looking at CO2 emissions. And it is useful for getting us started, but you could use engineering biology in that pigeonhole. So you could reduce the carbon footprint of making a material by using a biologically engineered system. So you could look at colorifics, where they try and pigment, add dye to fabrics before they're even made, or while they're being made. It's amazing. You can reduce the amount of waste, the amount of chemicals, the amount of CO2 footprint. But that's really just one bit. We have the other planetary boundaries that we're breaching, whether it's biodiversity, or whether it's water use, or whether it's resource use more generally. Those are also important. And engineering biology sit at the core of that. So you have 16 SDGs. Let's look at the last one first, the partnership. We need to embed this partnership approach if something like engineering biology is going to be used well. I mean, we had the FBI at the iGEM competition to try and look at the safety and engage people early from the scientist community. That's an amazing example. Wow, they're there, they're on the ground, they're listening, they're trying to engage. The other ones are possible to be impacted by engineering biology. So you could have water, obviously. You could sort of engineer material to take out nasties that otherwise kill you. That's one example, but also industry, built materials, all of these other applications, water under, life underwater, over water, those can be impacted positively by engineering biology. I think we need to drive home this message of there are wicked problems that are happening right now, and engineering biology can help address it. But there are these hurdles that's holding it back. So maybe we can come together a little bit more to try and address more of those wicked problems.
Thank you, Henrik. So lots of opportunity, but we're not at the state yet where there's going to be really kind of industrial scale application of these high potential technologies. I want to make sure we get through a few more questions. So I'm going to just tell you the order we're going to do this in to give you some advance notice. Koya Sudeepa has asked, how can engineering biology be applied to biosensors? So Guy, could you maybe give us a quick response on that? And then Dave Delpy has asked us to not just talk about the positives of engineering biology, which is a fair point, but to recognize that improving engineering of this technology lowers the bar for entry for people who have malicious intent. And what's the response to this? So Guy, I'll get you started, and then if Henrik or Alicia, you'd like to come in on Dave's question, please do.
Sure. So engineering biology has been used over the past two decades, if not a little bit longer, to engineer biosensors. And the main principle is you need to engineer, for example, a cell so that it express. I will give. There are many different ways to do it, but I will give just one example to frame things. You can engineer a cell to express a protein on its cellular on its surface, on its cellular membrane, And then this protein will be capable of binding a ligand of interest. So imagine a pollutant, or imagine another molecule that we're interested in, or some molecule that is produced in the case of a disease or something like that. This binding to the cell surface expressed membrane then trigger a signaling cascade inside the cell that then can be connected, for example, to the expression of a fluorescent gene, a fluorescent protein. So upon binding, the cell then becomes fluorescent. So you get what is called a whole cell biosensor.
Thank you very much, Guy. Yes, that's a popular application. Alicia, would you like to come in on the potential for misuse of these technologies and what we can realistically do to minimize the chances of that resulting in negative impacts for society?
Yes, this is a big question that David's raised, isn't it, around security and how we protect ourselves in our research. I think, I'm a great advocate of open science, and I think we are global universities. Many of the universities, are now very globally orientated in terms of their campuses, etc. So how can we address these type of issues? Well, I think certainly in the bigger context, it's about awareness. It's about building awareness of the problems, making people aware that actually this is something that we have to think about. And I'm speaking in a kind of top level here rather than specific details. And actually in the past, that wouldn't have been the case. We wouldn't have necessarily really reached down to individual researchers and said, let's think about how this might actually not be, this might be misused or used in a way which it really wasn't originally designed for. So I think that awareness is really important. There's a much greater element of due diligence now at universities and processes in place and huge efforts to try and improve our assessment and how we do this. There's new organizations which you can go to where you can get information on this. So I think there is a lot more out there. In terms of specifics, in the healthcare arena, actually, I'm probably not the best example, actually, but maybe if Guy or Henrik can think of an area where they're particularly concerned about, I think that they might want to address that.
I mean, the trusted research agenda is now huge. It applies to so much of engineering. Guy, any particular perspectives?
The comment I want to make is that there are very few technologies that are not dual use. So biology is no exception. But we can pick any technology of today. We were citing the 5 key strategic technologies identified by the UK. Each of them is dual use. So it's inevitable. And if you develop something and make it accessible, yes, there are ways to exploit this technology or to repurpose it for other motives and for other purposes. Now, what people might be concerned about is, okay, what's the impact of something like that? Because we have all still some memory of the COVID pandemic. And people might associate, biology with consequences like this. The reality is that, if you were to have nefarious intentions, there are ways to wipe out the population that are way more direct than engineering biological systems.
Yeah, biology is hard to handle.
Yeah, the problem that I raised before, reliability, robustness, will go a long way for public acceptance. Will go a long way for penetration of the technology in our everyday lives in a safe and in a comfortable way where we can trust the technology. It is also what allows us to bring forward solutions to the core problems we have without having to ask ourselves twice, okay, I designed it this way, but it's doing something else.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of the original investment in the US in engineering biology came from the Department of Defense. So let's part the questions. I'm going to fit in one last question. I've been saving this one for you. You might not thank me, but it's from Dick Kitney, who of course is, I guess, one of the founding fathers of engineering biology. And he's asked us a difficult question, which is, which are the three most important components to make the UK world leading in terms of its bioeconomy? So I'm going to ask you each in turn to think about what are those three components that we really need. And then if you want to add any particular aspect of the bioeconomy that you would love to see thriving and coming to life in this next chapter for us, then I'm up for hearing that. But let's give you each the chance. I'm going to go to you, Henrik, first, and then to you, Alicia, and then finally to you, Guy. So, Henrik, give us your wish list. 3 things you think that are going to help us to really, really turbocharge engineering biology in the UK.
Excellent. Yes, let's do it. So, number 1, access to infrastructure, lab infrastructure. The US are investing massively. What are we doing? So much shortage. 2, access to talent. So can we have a fast track or a preferred route for engineering biology? Just one of the 5, priority technologies. And then 3, the third one I would say is really developing this biofoundry infrastructure. So I talk a lot about infrastructure, but biofoundries as my third priorities. They can support so many academic and new startups and scale up, and they can really underpin this whole UK nationwide approach to engineering biology.
Brilliant.
Application?
Yeah.
I would go for co-cultures. I would love to see more co-cultures taking off. They underpin so many areas of engineering biology, and they get me very excited. But yeah, that's my one.
Well done, Henrik. Thank you very much. Alicia, over to you now.
Yes, well, I guess kind of building on that, I think something the UK is really good at is collaboration. I think we collaborate well. I think we have some excellent networks, and I think we need to build on those. And, you can see it across many sectors, and I would think that's a really key element. I think probably, I would agree with Henrik on his people. I think making sure that we've got a foundation of people coming through is absolutely fundamental. And our CDTs are excellent at training, actually. So I think strengthening and building on those is really important. And I actually think what we need is a strong entrepreneurial spirit in our scientists. I've been really trying to promote this at the moment, and Henrik is an excellent example of that because he's really great. I'm inspired. I'm going to invest in his companies. But I think we need this entrepreneurial spirit in our scientists, and building that in is really important.
Awesome, Alicia. Henrik is waiting to follow up on that kind offer. And I'll go to you, Guy.
I agree with everything that has been said. I would say long-term support is one key thing. Patience is another one, because I think that we need to be a bit careful with wanting a quick win. It's great. We should have quick wins, but I think it takes time to build a technology that delivers, a technology that enables us to go beyond the big challenges we need to face. So we can't have a short-term thinking on this, because it might deliver a few things, but it might not exploit the full potential of what we could do. And if I was to take a decision for the UK, I would try to make sure that I give this space for this technology to become mature and to reach its full potential. I can't agree more on talent and on multidisciplinarity. I mean, this is, I think, the wealth and the beauty of engineering biology. It allows us to combine talents. It allows us to work together. So it's an opportunity for us to come together, and I think the UK would be very good at this.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for such an interesting and stimulating discussion. Thank you also everyone who's joined online for your very insightful and quite challenging questions for our panel. I've always felt that engineering biology is a kind of hidden gem in the UK. We have such a huge opportunity here. We've, I think, second only to the US in the amount of public investment into R&D in this area globally. And as you can see for yourself, we've got such a lot of talent in this community. So if this conversation has sparked your interest, or if you've got any other comments about today's event, please do respond to the survey that's been posted in the chat, or will be emailed out to you following the event. Your feedback really helps us to keep improving our events and make sure that they're responding to what you would really like us to be talking about. So stay tuned for future critical conversations on our LinkedIn page. The next session will be on telecommunications, live on LinkedIn at 4 p.m. on Thursday, the 16th of November. Please do join us for that. The link to register is in the chat below the screen. And you can catch up on previous critical conversations again via the link in the chat below. So thank you again to our brilliant speakers. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a really good evening. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.